I just wanted to bring a quick devotional message to you this week. And the passages that we are going to look at just for the next couple of minutes come from Acts chapter 20, verses 22 and 23, and then Acts chapter 21, just verse 4. So if you would just listen to these passages. And now I am bound by the Spirit to go to Jerusalem. I don't know what awaits me, except that the Holy Spirit tells me in city after city that jail and suffering lie ahead. And then jumping just one chapter over to the 21st chapter, verse 4, Paul says, "We went ashore, found the local believers, and stayed with them a week. These believers prophesied through the Holy Spirit that Paul should not go on to Jerusalem." In both of these chapters and both of these sets of verses, they take place on Paul's return to Jerusalem after his third missionary journey. He's gone out and they planted several churches, they've revisited some previous churches they had planted, and now they are on their way back to Jerusalem. And on his way, he's stopping at some churches that they had planted on his first or his second missionary journeys and giving basically a farewell message to each of them. And in the first passage in Acts chapter 20, verses 22 and 23, he has called for the elders from the church in Ephesus to come down to the coast to meet him so that he doesn't have to make the trip inland. And when they come to see him, he tells them that he feels bound by the Holy Spirit to go on to Jerusalem. That is, he feels like the Spirit is compelling him and urging him and wanting him to go to Jerusalem. He says, I don't know what lies ahead other than it's not going to be a good situation, but the Spirit is moving me, prompting me to go to Jerusalem. In the next chapter, chapter 21, verse 4 that we read, again, Paul is at a different church. He's this time at the church in the town of Tyre, and he's talking with the believers in that church. And we're told in that passage that the believers said that, they prophesied, the believers in the church in Tyre prophesied through the Holy Spirit that Paul should not go to Jerusalem. So how could two people or two groups of people that are filled with the Holy Spirit prophesy or receive contradicting messages from the Spirit? What is this telling us? I think one thing that it tells us is that God allows us to choose, that God does not override our wills, our ability to make decisions. I don't think that these passages are saying that one was right and the other was wrong. I don't think it's saying that Paul was right and the believers in the church in Tyre were wrong, or vice versa. Rather, I think it's, again, pointing to the reality that God allows human choice. God will accomplish his purpose, his will, with whatever choices that we make. And I believe that it would have been the same in Paul's situation, that whatever choice he had made, if he had chosen not to go to Jerusalem and listen to the people in the church in Tyre, listen to the Spirit through the people in the church of Tyre, I believe God would accomplish his purpose, his will in Paul's life in some way, in some other way. Maybe Paul would have been able to make it to Rome in a different fashion, and maybe Paul would have been able to go on to Spain as he hoped to do and longed to do. So I believe whatever choice that we make, or whatever choice he would have made, it would have been God still using that to bring about his purposes. The other thing that this points out is the importance of discerning and wrestling with a community of believers about decisions that we need to make. It shouldn't just be a solo decision. It shouldn't just be a solo effort, but it needs to include other believers. And so how do we apply this? Now, I think there's numerous instances and numerous situations in our own lives where we can take this and apply it in whatever decision that we are facing. But maybe specifically right now, one of the ways I see this applying to many churches and believers is with the question on whether we should reopen the church buildings for worship, for public worship, or continue just to worship online virtually. Many people say we shouldn't be not holding worship that it's a violation of our religious freedoms to not do that, and so we should be together. Whereas others say, no, we need to not meet together as a way of showing compassion and love for people and being willing to give up some of our rights in order to show compassion, concern, and care for other people. I think in whatever decision that a church will make or individual followers will make, and whether they attend or not, I think God will continue to work through either of those situations, that He won't override our abilities to choose, and He will find a way to work through whatever our choices are to bring about His purposes and His will. But I think the big thing to keep in mind, and what I want to challenge us to do, is when it comes to decisions, whether small or big, to not make those decisions alone, but to seek other followers of Christ and to wrestle with one another in the outcomes of those decisions. If you would like to contact me, feel free to do so. But until then, have a blessed week.